Basketball is perhaps the most unique team sport out there due to the ability of one player to impact the game. In different team sports like baseball or football, while there is the capacity for guys to be standouts and all-stars in their role, it's rare if not impossible for one athlete to have as large of an impact on the game as they can in basketball. For example, Tom Brady, who is widely considered to be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, if not the greatest, and helped lead one of the greatest offenses and teams of all time, was ultimately able to do all of this while only playing on one side of the ball. So for all his offensive impact, it's impossible to talk about Brady without mention of his defensive linemen or offensive weapons like Rob Gronkowski, Randy Moss, and Julian Edelman. And this isn't to say that the mention of these players in any way diminishes the greatness of Brady or his various offensive tools, but rather it allows for the appropriate credit to be given to all parts of the team to highlight who starred in their role and helped the team win. This holistic approach to looking at sports and the idea of winning is unfortunately one which is essentially absent in all basketball discourse, and instead of looking at teams and what goes into winning day by day, we have this silly concept known as alphas. Now, it can also be referred to as the Batman and Robin conversation, and it's essentially used to attempt to place all the credit and praise for winning as well as all of the blame for losing onto the shoulders of one player in the NBA. The concept is one which stems from the NBA's decision to lean into individual superstars in order to build the league, and as a result, faces have substituted for teams and resulted in a lot of discourse becoming centered around singular players and not actual basketball concepts and matchups. And while this approach is highly effective at building the league's brand and allows for easy access into conversations that repeatedly occur on ESPN, it results in many a great player being overlooked and minimized in order to underscore the greatness of whomever the topic of conversation is. We've seen this effect time and time again as it relates to superstar duos, and the most recent example was of course this year in the playoffs where the dynamic duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were routinely pit against one another by the fans and the media. Well, to say that the media's attempt to manufacture tension between Jaylen and Jason began this year would be a blatant lie. However, it most certainly came back in full force, especially following Brown's Eastern Conference Finals and NBA Finals MVP. Instead of an applause to the front office, as well as a congratulations to the Celtics franchise and the entirety of Boston, people used this as an opportunity to bash Jason Tatum in order to uplift Jaylen Brown. The obsession with the alpha and beta concept in basketball discourse is toxic to say the least, and the idea that two players can't coexist and be great together can and has had extremely detrimental effects on legendary NBA duos of the past. And while the most obvious example of this is Kobe and Shaq's breakup over basketball and leadership differences, I think that a different example can be used for the way the on-court differences and quote-unquote alpha obsessions can taint the legacy of a beautiful NBA duo. The story of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen is a strange one, and honestly, the same can be said of all of Jordan's relationships with his teammates as seen in The Last Dance. While in the documentary, his teammates were complimentary of his on-court skill, they were also very clear about the fact that he wasn't a very agreeable or friendly type of teammate. Jordan's fierce competitive ways that estranged him from his teammates and allowed him to take the lead on the court have been the main factor in him being heralded as the GOAT and held up by the media as the picture of a winner. Because while Jordan's 6 rings are undoubtedly his crowning achievement and the most pure example of what it means to be a winner in basketball, he's championed because of the way he won. MJ was always the guy, the pure alpha, and the face that the league and the media could point to and say that's the man. And it's this level of love and reverence by the media that makes his post-career relationship with Scottie Pippen so interesting. Scottie's sentiments on Jordan have varied a lot through the years, with him sometimes saying that nobody can compare to MJ, while more recently he shifted his tune and begun slandering him for being a loser, selfish player, and what I will return to later, a guy who didn't know how to win. The tendencies that Michael Jordan had on the court that made him a legend to the media and the fans simultaneously made him hated amongst his teammates who have continually been forced to live in his shadow as the years have gone by. This is despite his numerous career accolades that include finishing top 3 in MVP voting the year MJ left, helping lead the team to 55 wins, leading the NBA in steals in 1995, and 8 first-team all-defensive selections. he's still remembered as Michael Jordan's sidekick, and this level of disrespect is incentivized by the media in their need to not only appoint an alpha, but discredit the pieces around him in order to maximize his greatness. And Scottie's feelings of neglect have resulted in him calling out MJ numerous times, especially following the Last Dance documentary, and claiming that he was not only misrepresented, but minimized in order to help further build the legend of Michael Jordan. Scottie's tragic tale is a prime example of the perils of the alpha and beta concept, and the problems with the way that we think about teams. However, there's another dynamic pairing in NBA history that can function as a somewhat flawed, but potentially ideal way that the dynamic duo concept can be discussed in the future. The LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh pairing. Now to start, I want to clarify that there are a lot of flaws in the way that these guys are discussed, and one of the main flaws is that I'll be excluding Chris Bosh from this conversation and focusing on the pairing of LeBron and Dwayne Wade. I plan to talk about Chris Bosh in a later video about the lack of credit given to players who sacrifice production for wins, but for now, this conversation will center on D. Wade and Bron. Dwayne Wade is perhaps one of the most unique cases of a quote-unquote Robin that we've ever had in NBA history. As a player, his greatness is recognized by everyone, and players who attempt to question him without being on his level have been thoroughly clowned on national TV for the world to see.
He's made All-NBA first team twice. Paul hasn't done it. He made All-NBA 8 times to your 4. He's made All-Defensive team 3 times to your 0.
Ooh, 0. Rough.
He's won 1 scoring title. You weren't able to win the scoring title.
That's too bad.
He has 3 rings. You have 1 ring.
Ooh, 3 is bigger than 1.
The virtual consensus is that he's the 3rd best shooting guard of all time behind Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, and his ability to not only build the Miami Heat basketball brand but become synonymous with it is a feat that no other Robin has done in NBA history. He has one of, if not the greatest NBA Finals debut performances ever, and helped the Heat win their first franchise title, as well as help to popularize the Eurostep and illustrate the importance of the pump fake. And he was just as dangerous on the defensive side of the ball as he was on the offensive. All of these things can be said about Dwayne Wade by himself. However, when the conversation about his relationship with LeBron comes up, you'll find that the discourse isn't nearly as one-dimensional as it is with Scottie and Mike. Instead of the same old tale of Batman and Robin, Dwayne Wade is given far more respect in the story of LeBron, and he's recognized as a pivotal figure and, more importantly, the guy who taught LeBron how to win. He's not simply a sidekick or a guy who was there to help LeBron, but he's recognized as just as much of a threat and important piece to the Heat championship as LeBron. And he's also given an immeasurable amount of credit for LeBron's ability to become the winner he has following his departure from Miami. In this way, LeBron and Dwayne Wade's stories are recognized as being interconnected and related to one another. They are inseparable, and the recognition by the media has only been further cemented by the closeness and friendship that LeBron and D. Wade have continued to exhibit in the public eye. I bring up their relationship because it illustrates that there is hope for the way that we can eventually begin to think about basketball in dynamic pairings. While I understand Scottie and Mike have vastly different stories than LeBron and D. Wade, the idea that we as a community have the potential to recognize that basketball isn't simply an alpha-beta situation means we can eventually begin to shift the way we see JB and JT's pairing. As a community, our understanding of team sports is fundamentally flawed, and we've been tricked by the NBA, ESPN, and capitalist corporate interests into falling in love with the idea of a player who's toxic to his teammates and plays the game in a way that isn't conducive to winning. And understand that I am in no way advocating against the idea of leaders or even hyper-aggressive scorers on championship teams, but I'm suggesting that we don't have to tear down, minimize, and ignore the greatness of certain players to contextualize the greatness of another guy. And just as we've seen pairings like Scottie and Mike driven apart by this idea, similar pairings like Kobe and Shaq, LeBron and Kyrie, and even Steph and KD have all suffered at the hands of this concept. We have routinely thrown stones in allegations of coattail riding and alphas and betas, and then when teams break up over fraudulent narratives that were created by media companies desperate to market someone, we act as though we don't know what happened. It's unfair to the players, and I'm happy to see, despite despite the best efforts of the media and the fans, Jalen and Jason were able to stick together and acknowledge one another's greatness without feeding into the adversarial picture that the media and we as fans have tried to paint. The same way we think about LeBron and D Wade as two iconic players who are great in their own right, but simultaneously essential to one another's story, is the way we can potentially think of future dynamic duos where we recognize the greatness of both without minimizing one to highlight the other. So to simplify this video and quote a great rapper who knows how to pick his battles wisely, they act like two legends cannot coexist. So that's going to do it for this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.